Master Puri, first thing I would like to ask you is which language you would prefer to use, English or Hindi, or I can speak a bit of Punjabi also.
विजय, आप जो लैंग्वेज में करना चाहे मैं कोशिश करूंगा. आई विल स्पीक सम इंग्लिश, सम हिंदी. आप नेपाली बोलिए, मुझे उसमें कोई आपत्ति नहीं है. थोड़ा सा कभी कभी ट्रांसलेशन करने की जरूरत पड़ेगी.
एकदम ठीक है. आई विल ट्राई इंग्लिश एंड इफ आई एम अनकंफर्टेबल आई विल गो टू whatever. आप चलिए.
सत श्री अकाल जी. हाँ जी, सत श्री अकाल. वेरी गुड.
So nice to have you in our podcast.
Thank you.
Master Puri, first thing I would like to know this morning is that as you are about to complete your tenure here in Nepal, you are also about to retire from Indian Foreign Service, Does this fact make it easier for you to talk to a journalist in Nepal?
Vijay, I don't know whether it makes it easier, but you must understand that this is a very, let me say, game-changing time for me. Let me say something to you. Vijay, I joined the Indian Foreign Service at the age of 22 years, at the first possibility of anybody joining. My entire life has been the Indian Foreign Service. I don't know what day after tomorrow holds out for me. So, easier to talk to a journalist in Nepal, in India, anywhere else, I don't know. But please understand that for me, it's an unbelievable change. My father was India's ambassador to the European Union in Brussels. My father told me, if you want to serve the country in the new and contemporary age that we are seeing, and you want to be part of the system in which I have grown up, that is my father's grown up, let me tell you and make a suggestion to you. Opt for the Indian Foreign Service. It is fantastic. It's a world that all of us sitting in India did not know too much about, but it's a world that will open to India in a very big way in your times.
I remember Ambassador Dev Mukherjee candidly saying in a joke, saying that कि देश को बिगाड़ना है तो IAS में चला जा, देश खुद को बिगाड़ना है तो IFS में चले जा.
मैंने ये बिगाड़ने की कोई बात नहीं की. मैंने सिर्फ इतनी बात की कि इंडिया की भूमिका मेरे ज़माने में as compared to my father's time would change dramatically, which was his understanding. And let me tell you, I am wearing his watch today. I am very proud to wear an old Seiko, but an automatic one. Today also I am told there's some kind of value attached to it. So it's a very special day.
So you have a very, very touching story. We would like to focus today on something different,
Why not? Go ahead.
Is it easier for any serving Indian ambassador here in Nepal to candidly talk about India-Nepal relations while his tenure is still on in Indian Foreign Service?
So let me say this to you, Vijay. All members of a civil service, and that's what the Indian Foreign Service is also, are of course bound by certain rules and regulations, which make it, let me say, that you certainly need to follow some of these elements in talking in what you call candidly. But I have a very simple point to it. I don't know about whether it is possible for Mr. X or Miss Y, but I want to just tell you this, that when you have conversations which reflect what you think and what you feel and what you really believe in, then these conversations touch the other person also, no matter how hardened a position that person may have, no matter how hardened his or her viewpoint is.
Compared to the time of your father, has situation for an Indian diplomat become more compatible to talk openly on India-Nepal relationship today?
Look, my father never served in Nepal, but if I look at those times were vastly different both for India as well as Nepal. In the first instance, let me make the big point to you. Nepal had really not seen globalization. I don't think many people in Nepal realize that the biggest change that your country has seen in the last 20 years is actually globalization and being part of globalization. We see political transformation, we see some changes otherwise taking place. But Nepal, let's have a look at Nepal in even the 1970s and 1980s. How many people had traveled the world other than a few well-off people and a few other people having gone to India. That's the big change. And that's why the situation that we are talking about is more complex. And there's no doubt about that at all. But that's reality, that's contemporary world.
To what level the globalization of Nepal has affected India-Nepal relations?
It has certainly affected in several ways. Nepal's relationships with India were economic, societal, political, in every way. Several of these elements remain very, very strong and very powerful. But let's understand, aspirations of young Nepalis are now aspirations which are not just about what is happening in India, but what is happening in the world. Similarly, let me make the point to you, aspirations of young Indians today are global. They are not just what is happening in our country, where we came from, what we achieved and what our forefathers did. Those are groundworks, but we are building on today and building for a tomorrow, which is really a global world.
India-Nepal relationships are multi-layered and multivectorial.
Yep.
Just because one dimension has changed, has the relationship affected in entirety, or is just a small section of people that are affected by it?
I would not say that it's a small section, because in the case of Nepal, look at the number of people from your country who happen to be outside, even if they're doing simple jobs overseas. If we talk about a quarter of your population being overseas, and let's look at the connect back home. In villages far away everywhere, everybody is carrying a smartphone, looking at things that is happening. This has brought about a tectonic change in societal thinking in Nepal. And therefore, it is my considered belief that these particular things are not just sections and one facet. It's a facet which is very, very important, and we must understand. Good that we are rooted in where we come from. And those facets remain a constant, and they will remain a constant. But you also have to change with the facets that keep changing. And that's what is happening.
Ambassador Puri, please try to explain me what are the variables and what are the constants in India-Nepal relationship. What facets have changed and what facets will not change?
Vijay,
or everything will change?
Yeah, no, everything can't change. Look, physical geography can't change. But let me tell you, societal geography does have a variance. And we are seeing the variance. So let me try and look at this in a more granular manner. And let me point out a few simple things to you. I mentioned to you young people and their aspirations. But let us look at the changing Nepal. What all have you seen in the last, let's say, 20 or 30 years? I'll point out just 3 things to you. I mentioned globalization, so that's one very, very important facet, which is from the west to the east of Nepal, north to the south. Every single part of Nepal has come into contact with the global world, which wasn't the case earlier. Without any doubt, you have seen the issue of political change in Nepal. Let me make a point to you about the political change in Nepal. Usually in political science classes, etc., the discourse is that, oh, we've become a republic from being a monarchy. Oh, of course, we all understand that. But do you understand one very strong underlying element of that particular thing? And that is that actually now sovereignty rests with the people. Earlier on, sovereignty rested somewhere else. It's a very, very big change as far as Nepal is concerned. The first, I should say, nation state in the Westphalian concept, in the context in South Asia, but now having undergone a transformation, perhaps the last state in South Asia to have undergone this particular transformation. Vijay, let me make the third point to you. Nepal had very little idea of what urbanization means. Globalization is one facet of the modern world and the contemporary world, but Nepal had very little idea of what true urbanization meant. There's only one major city in Nepal. 20 years back, Kathmandu was quite a nice, idyllic city. Today, it's a teeming metropolis with the ideas, the aspirations, the approaches, and every single problem that a great metropolis faces. And in various senses, it's come very soon, very quickly, and you will have to grapple with it. These, in my opinion, are the huge big changes. We in India need to become cognizant of them. And I'll tell you why I say that.
Okay, I would just like to stop you
Sure.
here. Talking about political changes, we see a major political upheaval in this country every 10 years or the 15 years. Are you sure that the process of political changes has come to a finality, or there is no more people's movement waiting on?
Let me make a slightly different point of view, Vijay. When
Are you saying the same thing like the liberal democracy has come here to
Vijay,
stay, or this is the final?
Not at all.
Final stop?
Let me make a point to you a little differently. Look, when you talk about political upheavals, actually you are looking at the way people look at things in the present, in contemporary time.
No, sir, I just want to know one thing is...
So listen to me. Just listen to me a little bit.
Has the political process come
so
to an
let me say something.
grand finale?
So I'm coming to that. So when you make this point that Nepal has seen upheavals, in a time span, these are changes which had limited impact. You've had a major change. Now, I don't know what will happen in the future, but I find it very difficult that power will not rest with the people of Nepal.
What did you say?
I said, I don't know what will happen in the future, but I don't think that power will not rest with the people of Nepal.
Yeah, that much we can agree.
Thank you.
When we talk about India-Nepal relations, can one interview, one seminar, or one particular government, or one particular ambassador, either in India and Nepal, can cover the wide spectrum Indo-Nepal relation carries along with it? Even if they try, will it be realistic or lasting in nature? What are the limitations of a government or an ambassador or a political system or a political pundit in assessing?
Vijay, you're now adding many things. Individuals, ambassadors, pundits, etc., etc. We can club in one category. Institutional arrangements are quite different. Now, I don't think, given the length and breadth of Nepal, given the scope of the relationships, both physical as well as in material terms and in terms of our societal interactions, I don't think you can have much more than a few in-depth places of focus and lots of understanding. Believe me, if you spend 2 years or 3 years in Nepal as India's ambassador here, and you get to know a few people, a few things, and a few areas of action, I think you're already educating yourself in a very big way, because as you mentioned, things which are going on for generations. Is it easy for any of us to find the answers straight away? Otherwise, I would be the brightest guy and somebody else would have been equally bright and would have found all the answers much earlier than that.
We'll come to that in a while. I have a few questions regarding that. I would like to now know, Ambassador Shiv Mukherjee, during a casual conversation, told me once that there are so many layers in Indo-Nepal relations, wheels within wheels, that is the complexity as well as the beauty of the system, Are these multiple layers increasing or decreasing over the years, in your opinion now?
First of all, I'll tell you, I know about my country, and I'm sure that is true for many countries in the world. In terms of interaction, there are always multiple layers. There was a time when it was limited to literally one layer, your ambassador, or maybe some missionary who went across, etc. But in our days of globalizations, when you have world leaders traveling around, meeting each other frequently, telephoning each other, having video conferences, there is no doubt that there are multiple layers. However, having noted the fact that there are multiple layers, and in India-Nepal relations, these are multiple layers which operate at different levels, I do believe that in the state of play in which we find ourselves, governments are important, government leaders are important, and government leaders' thinking, approaches, etc. are important. Ambassadors have a certain role to play in that, and I am happy that I've had an opportunity to play that role for India in at least 2 places.
There are certain existential realities. There are certain existential reality in India-Nepal relationships. If the governments try to forget those existential reality, will governments be able to execute the decisions which they take? What are the limitations of institutional arrangements in terms of India-Nepal relationship?
Vijay, this is a question that is often posed, and it's a question that is often also debated. My understanding of all this is that governments, reflect, generally speaking, thinking at least among those who are the ruling set of people. So therefore, there is a certain kind of consensus which operates behind decisions that government takes. Now, having said all this, I recognize very much that in the case of India and Nepal, there are so many layers of interaction, so many layers which have their own sets of potentials, their own way of working, that governments don't necessarily control everything. But governments on the other hand are important because they can start the process of minds, they can start the process of approaches, and then they of course have a certain amount of physical power to enforce ideas, do things, etc. And so therefore changes do happen because governments, let me say, influence the way changes should happen.
You took over India House when the weather was very rough in Nepal. It was after blockade of India.
Sure.
And India's displeasure with the Nepal's new constitution. Compared to that day, how do you feel today?
Vijay, I joined in March of 2017. The issues that you are referring to are at least a year older. So, maybe I had some benefit as a result of all this. Look, some of these issues are very well known. They keep resonating all the time. But my understanding is, as I mentioned to you earlier when we started this conversation, that for India, any place in the world, and Nepal in particular, and all countries in our region, when power rests with the people, when democratic forces move forward, we have a sense of good feeling with it. As the world's largest democracy, as a country which has prided itself in its democracy, there is in all leadership of India a general good feeling of that. Now, ups and downs happen. We are a neighbor which is unparalleled in the whole world, open border. People have struggled 50 years to down one thing or the other.
Isn't it surprising that for a country like India, which all the time supported the movement for democracy, when the democracy was restored and the new constitution was about to come, then the misunderstanding started, So can we say that India's aspiration in Nepal, real intentions in Nepal and what it propagates and the political system in Nepal, they
no,
do
not at all. Not at all, Vijay. Not at all. On the contrary, let me tell you.
Sometimes do you regret that the democracy was here?
No,
Probably
not at all.
System, you never had the trouble you had in Republic.
No, let me say this. I used to be ambassador to the European Union, and the famous saying used to be, what is the European Union? Is there a telephone number where I can dial? Look, let me tell you, we are well aware of all of this. We are familiar with this. But we come from a country which has believed strongly in the power of democracy. Therefore, democracy coming to Nepal, always supported by India, will be supported and always been supported. But we also believe that you need to work hard on an inclusive democracy. Because what is democracy? It is, after all, the will of the people. The right of the might. That's particularly important. So therefore, suggestions for course corrections, this, that, are par for the course for the nature of our interactions with each other. And we are very happy that these things happen. We work, we talk, we take things forward. We learn from each other in various ways. We adopt various ideas which get practiced elsewhere. And so that's the nature of the game. At the end of the day, do remember, Nepal is a nation state, a member of the United Nations, so is India. We all do certainly pursue our interests. We must pursue our interests. But if we can try and pursue the interests in such a manner that we work to minimize contestations, work to maximize collaboration, and work on a win-win, I think we are both sides great beneficiaries.
If you have to choose between India's own national interests vis-a-vis Nepal's democracy, what would you choose?
I have very clear in my mind. I am an Indian. I'm a patriotic Indian. India is my country, and I look to serve India's interests. I don't believe that a democratic Nepal and India's interests can ever be divergent.
If they do, in a hypothetical situation?
You are asking hypothetical, but these cannot happen.
Okay.
If you are genuinely democratic, these will never happen.
Okay. After your arrival in Kathmandu, it so happened that the tension slowly mellowed down.
Maybe it was the pink colored turban.
maybe your personality.
People haven't seen it around.
Yeah.
An ambassador who laughs and jokes, willing to hit the dance floor. Well, yeah.
I don't know the reason, but we can safely say that.
I don't partake alcohol, so maybe I'm a very unique kind of guy to be around here.
it mellowed down till the Kalapani issue
Sure.
came up, right?
Yeah.
Where do things stand today on Kalapani?
Look, you mentioned the current border issues. There have been many other such things in the past. And let me tell you, in the nature of our relationship, 1500 kilometers or 1800 kilometers of an open border, people going across, goods and services flowing, these, things keep on cropping up. And they keep cropping up even in areas that those who are, the masters of what is happening.
That we all know.
Yeah.
Where
So I'm coming to Kalapani. I'm coming just to Kalapani. Look, in the case of this particular issue, the state of play is like this. The Nepalese government wants to have talks, and we have responded to them. And this is now a matter between the two governments to sit up, decide on where these talks, etc., will be held, when they'll be held, etc. So the process is on.
Do you have a time frame and the process and the
So
structure?
this is a thing between the two governments. They'll sit and watch, but the process is on in making these decisions.
I have had the pleasure of coming across some of your predecessors,
Sure.
in fact, quite a few of them, and
Indeed, you and I are meeting only because of them.
they all had their own flavors
Sure,
and style of functioning.
sure.
This is
Well, most of us are cut from the same cloth, but I agree with you that flavors can be different.
Yeah, they were cut from the same cloth, but the way they would tailor their suits,
Sure, sure.
and the places where they would stitch their
I'm
suits
happy
were
I'm not wearing a suit.
Yeah. To what level do you think that the personality of an ambassador in Kathmandu, or our ambassador in Delhi for that matter, Nilambarji, affects the entirety of the relationship?
My own understanding of the role of, I'm not talking about in general the role of an ambassador, that's a very big question, but limited to the role of Indian ambassador in Nepal, is that the role is important. The role is, but I would not go to the extent of saying that it's the only defining role. Fundamentally, in today's day and age, it is a relationship which is most strongly anchored in the relationship between two governments. And of course, at the level of people, so many things are happening. But the relationship that you talk about is relationship at the level of the two governments and the leaderships of the government. The ambassador has a certain role to play, and a role which is a public role in Nepal for the Indian ambassador, certainly. But it's also a role about reaching back to your own headquarters and talking to the people there and putting across a sense of the perspective of how things are here and understanding the two. So it's a bit of a complex role. It's more complex than we see, for example, in many other countries in the world.
Would you toe what New Delhi tells you, or you also take the message
Vijay,
back?
let's be quite clear. I told you I left college and joined the Indian Foreign Service. This has been my life. I am part of a disciplined set. Instructions for all civil servants, including diplomats, emanate from headquarters and leadership. Of that, there's no doubt. Of course.
But do you influence?
Of course, as you grow senior in the positions, you have the possibilities of reaching back, trying to influence the way decisions are taken, to guide, to sort of suggest, to recommend, etc. But at the end of the day, decisions are all those of the government, and those are the decisions that you work on and implement.
Can you enlighten the Nepalese public about who takes decisions on Nepal? Who makes India's policy?
Nepal is a absolutely critical neighbor and a very important neighbor for us. Decisions of Nepal get taken at the highest level in India. So to say X or Y, it's obvious. They get taken at the very highest level of political and foreign ministry leadership.
When we talk about relations, they are not just the political or the diplomatic relations. Where do the social, cultural, historical, these things fit in?
Yeah, but
or to what level
Vijay,
do they
with
influence?
an open border and people going across all the time, those decisions have their own autonomous self. So, whether somebody wants to go to Kailash Mansarovar Yatra via Nepal, or somebody wants to visit Pashupatinath, or they want to do something or set up their business. In a country like India, these are autonomous decisions. People take them on their own. But I do believe that governments, in a sense, set the tone. I'll give you a little example. For a last couple of years, many people here in Nepal noticed that some states in India were giving a subsidy for people undertaking the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. So the Nepal-India Friendship Association went to India a year or two back and said, look, please also encourage, through some kind of subsidy process, people coming to Nepal, to Muktinath, etc. Well, a few months back, I noticed that one of the state governments has announced a small subsidy of people coming to Pashupatinath. And today in the morning, I was there at the mandir, and the PADT member secretary told me, sir, जब से प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी यहाँ पर आए और जब से आप लोगों ने ये नया कार्यक्रम शुरू किया, यहाँ जितने पिलग्रिम्स आते हैं वो इतने नंबर्स बढ़ गए हैं. So sir, these things do happen.
Is it possible that between two countries, social, cultural, religious relations
Economic
are A grade, and the political and the diplomatical relations are not to that level? They are in anomaly. Can they happen, or can they work in anomaly?
You know, my own view is, for short periods, yes, but not over a long period of time. Classically, we always talk about the flag and trade as two symbols of this particular side, peoples and so on, versus that. You know, you must strive for a degree of harmony, because what happens is one facilitates the other. And without this facilitation, then things do happen, but there is an element of restraint or just doing it as a result of rote and routine. And so therefore, I really believe that it's very important that we try and keep the relations between governments convivial, good, friendly, recognizing each other's interests and working to maximize the gains of the bilateral relationship.
I would like to refer a word Ambassador Dev Mukherjee would use. He would use a word called decibel. He would say that there is a lot of decibel in the valley and little action on the table in terms of actualizing the potentialities of our two nations. Do you have any comment to that?
You know, I understand what Ambassador Mukherjee is saying. Two things I'd like to point out to you. One, from the time when he was here till now, the percentage of Nepal's population centered in Kathmandu has risen substantially. I started by mentioning to you urbanization. So a great deal of change. So economic clout has started concentrating in Kathmandu. It's a different matter that I believe that this clout will now dissipate because of globalization, changes in India, etc., etc. However, there is little doubt about the major issues that he says. But you know, on the other hand, there has to be a certain recognition that a place which has historically been the capital of Nepal, where Nepal-centric action has always taken place, that the decibel in Kathmandu matters. And that's not something that we can, you know, just let aside.
No, I'm not saying that. And we all agree that the mob of London decides the mood of England, they say.
Well, so at least we are using the word decibel of Kathmandu. Not a bad idea. Look, let me explain this. Let me explain this to you.
Mic, okay? You might.
Yeah, let me explain this to you. Yeah. Vijay, look, Kathmandu sets some of the rules and regulations that are then implemented, let's say, even across the borders. So let's say we are talking about trade. Supposing we are talking in terms of flow of goods and services, and we've seen so many of these things. You know, things don't just keep happening elsewhere. They were happening elsewhere when the infrastructure in Nepal was far weaker, when particularly not just the road, because that's a physical infrastructure, but the communication infrastructure in Nepal was much weaker. So if it would take a week for a letter to get from Kathmandu all the way to, let's say, Banbasa, you could say that, you know, there is a decibel here, but world goes on there. But that's not the case anymore. Before you can say Jack Robinson, the message has reached Simikot or it has reached Jhapa, or it has reached anywhere else.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of change in
sir,
this.
while talking about Delhi and Kathmandu, I forgot to ask you a supplementary question.
Sure.
That was, Nepal is now a federal state, So how will the federalism in Nepal affect the Indo-Nepal relationship? Now
I'll tell you something about I'll tell you something about federalism, because I've seen it in my own country. When we started off in 1947, the number of states in India was, I think, less than 10, and today we are 29. What has been the greatest impact of this federalism? We have seen that development has got much closer in its centricity towards the people, and consequently all political leaders, no matter which political party and no matter their contestation at elections, but they've all focused to see that development reaches people. I'll give you a small example.
That much we all know.
So this is why I'm answering your question.
India ke saath relation.
That's exactly the point. So what am I saying? When that happens, and when in Nepal you start undertaking federalism, and the governments and in the provinces and at local levels understand that they have to develop and they have to deliver to their people, what do the governments start doing? They start doing things that they can do themselves, and what they can't do or it's beyond their purview, they start putting pressure to get those things done. In my opinion, the number one thing that all these governments will do is to better the quality of life for their people. And I believe there they will want to leverage the positive geography with India. And I believe, therefore, it would not only be a Kathmandu-led push, it would be a push in which the federal provinces of Nepal, even local governments, each and every one of whom has the benefit of this easier geography as far as India is concerned, to take advantage of it. Therefore, I see a lot of positivity in federalism here.
Sir, there is an emotional perspective of India-Nepal relations.
Sure.
If I may say bluntly, there is arrogance or ignorance in part of India, and some sort of inferiority complex on back of our head in Nepal, And do you think that that needs to be addressed? For example, there is a section in Kathmandu that believes India interferes in all domestic affairs of Nepal, and there is a section in Delhi that believes Nepal, especially our political leaders, want to have all goodies and favors and forgetting when they come to the power. Are we talking about two friends, where one is seen as an interfering all the time and another is seen as not being grateful, What do you think about these emotional perspectives of the game,
See, Vijay, these are...
Is there any reality to it, what I'm saying?
Look, you yourself circumscribed your question by saying there is a section. So when you say the section consists of so many people, there's no way I can argue, because we are both relatively large countries. Nepal at 30 million is not a very small country. So there are certainly people who believe in this, after all, and they also create certain perceptions because they have the power of writing, they have the power of the pen, now the power of the social media, etc., etc. They do. But what is my belief? My belief is such naysayers will continue to be present. Indeed, in democratic societies, they also have their own place. But what I believe is that those who are at the helm of affairs, whether societal, cultural, business, and of course government, it is important that they recognize that this is a relationship in which, yes, everybody will vie for his or her gain. Why not? That's perfectly fine. Competition is a perfectly fine word. But try to make as much of that into collaboration, less of contestation, because there's a win-win situation for both sides in this particular game.
As the world is now evolving or getting up for next decades, the traditional alliances are being readjusted, even in global or the regional scale, or reformed, or some alliances are broken. How do you expect India-Nepal relations to evolve in days to come? Do you see a major detour from the past, or business will continue as usual between India and Nepal?
Look, I'll tell you what, when you say this, we started off our conversation by my drawing your attention to globalization. Therefore, Nepal is no longer a country just where it is located physically, but it's part of the world. And Nepal is also having the benefits of that, but it also has to face some of the consequences as a result of globalization, even though in some senses you're a small player in the overall game of globalization. How do I see things moving in Nepal in the coming future? It is my considered belief that as there you see this rise of Asia, India starts doing well, China is growing itself. Your own perceptions about your own things, your own abilities to leverage all of this will increase greatly. And I personally do believe that in Nepal, no matter what the past has been itself, you will see a better materialistic quality of life in this country. This will have an enormous impact on the way people think, the way people behave, the way things are done, and I dare say that could also cause some kind of societal change in thinking processes. Let me make one little point to you. In Nepal, something that lots of people always talk about is we are a small country. I mentioned to you, by global standards, you're certainly not a small country. At 30 million, you would have been one of the larger countries in Europe. Even in area-wise, 1800 kilometers just vis-a-vis India and with China also, that certainly doesn't make you a small country. Yes, vis-a-vis India, China, the two largest populations in the world. But once all these changes get accumulated, they get centrified, in your own thinking, there will be greater movement among people in Nepal to harness what you've got, to take advantage of your situation as it exists, and basically ensure that you move towards a greater degree of prosperity for people. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
You just mentioned China. People in Nepal, on occasions, when we talk about India-Nepal relations, China pops up. To what level Indo-Nepal relationship depends on the state of Sino-Indian relations?
I don't think it should depend at all. Remember,
it should, but
so I'm coming.
To what level?
So let me say this to you. Look, India and China are neighbors. We have as much of a border with China directly as you have with China. Yeah, this is a relationship that has historic connotation. It has its own contestations. It has its own positivities. Today, remember, China is one of India's largest trading partners, huge investor in India. We cooperate in global fora. Indeed, the developing world goes further when India and China collaborate. So India-China relations will have their own dynamics and they will go forward in their own way. I am not in a position to comment on that. As far as Nepal is concerned, it would be my humble submission to everyone that Nepal should try and hyphenate its relationships with India the way they have been, leveraging geography, leveraging history, and taking advantage of things. That you have China as a neighbor, well, that's a given. And the fact that you deal with them, that's also given, and why not? You have every right to maximize benefits to yourself. But leave the contestation out. I don't think it necessarily helps. Instead, you should look in terms of what you can do bilaterally on either side.
My humble submission to you is,
Sir,
to what level Indo-Nepal relations will be affected if there is a massive change in Sino-Indian relationship? Will it affect, or we will remain totally unaffected?
Let me say this to you, Vijay. It will affect as you perceive it to be.
Okay.
It will not impact as we perceive, as you perceive. If you see yourself as some kind of beneficiaries of contestation, and please don't do that because it doesn't help. Indeed, you leverage your gains vis-a-vis India and your gains vis-a-vis China, and it will be good for Nepal. If you stop seeing yourself as anything of this kind, I personally think, see yourself as Nepal. Nepal for what it is. Your geography is known to everybody. But
if we start...
So let me say this to you. Vijay, your geography is known to everyone. You know your geography. But don't predicate your future and your economic growth on simply the geography of your being placed between India and China. Please predicate it on being as part of the world, taking advantage of the geography as it exists. That is what will result in a Samriddh Nepal at a faster and quicker date.
when we talk about globalization in Nepal, in a way it is an opportunity for us.
Yes.
But if we play our cards not that well and try to play between very big powers, what will be the consequences?
I think in your question lies the answer. I don't see any reason to do it. After all, benefiting from globalization has not taken place as a result of what you said in your question, isn't it? So be part of the globalized world. Work on that. It's very good. And take advantage of geography. Take full advantage of geography. You know, I can't stress this adequate, but the fact of easier geography should never be lost sight of. Indeed, any economic student would tell you that, you know, comparative advantage works in a particular way. Take advantage. The other side will also be happy with it.
When we talk about India and China being Nepal's neighbors, we often forget that we have a third neighbor. The third neighbor is our sky neighbor. That is neighbor to all countries in the world. USA.
That, Vijay, is your theory, but you're welcome to it. Yeah. You studied in Berkeley, so I guess these theories become normal.
मान न मान मैं तेरा मेहमान neighbor, you know.
पता नहीं मुझे. Globalization में तो वो हैं ये सबके neighbor.
Anyway, I just would like to know from you, Ambassador Puri, the latest drama in the stage in Kathmandu cocktail circuit is about MCC project of USA. I would not like to go into the details of this MCC project, but it's quite interesting that MCC requires Nepalese parliament's ratification. So, will this set a precedent that in future, any agreement Nepal government signs needs to be ratified by Nepalese parliament? In a way, it's good.
Vijay, I can't answer the question to you because, you know, this is really a matter of constitutional look-ins. Let me say this, in India, intergovernmental agreements are signed by the cabinet and that is the full power. But in many countries in the world, you go for parliamentary ratification. So I don't know the answers to all of this, but I believe that in the situation in Nepal that you face, it would be worth for the government to think about one thing, that intergovernmental agreements to the benefit of Nepal don't become hostage to domestic politics. I think that's something important that you should think of. As a country, as leadership in your country, that's entirely up to you, because you need to follow the path of what we just said. You want to become a middle income country in 10 years' time. You want to follow the path of Samriddhi. So look at that either you're able to carry people across, or look at what are the possibilities. So this is something really for Nepali leadership to think about.
Yeah, this is a very important point which you just mentioned, that the bilateral agreement signed by the Nepalese government, if they become a question of shuttlecock badminton game, shuttlecock of badminton, then it needs
it could impact.
It could impact, whether this way or that way. You know.
Yeah, you need to think about it.
But the positive side of this ratification through parliament might be that since the subsequent government in Nepal do not abide by the agreements, or
you know, Vijay, I can't answer these questions to you, because to assume that subsequent governments would be chary or wary of implementing things which previous governments have done and not so because previous parliaments have passed, I don't know the answers to this. In my country, in India, at least generally, the scene is that whichever things have been done by government are always honored by government, no matter which party happens to be in government.
Yeah, I was just playing a devil's advocate to you, you know. But this is an important issue that
you have to think through it.
We have to think
as
ourselves,
a country.
You know. I was just asking you as a.
No, my view is very clear that I believe government represents the will of the people. I believe that government has a kind of general consensus for what it does, how it pilots these things, how it itself derives legitimacy for what it does. It's really for you to do. You know, in a very interesting sense, Vijay, just think about it. You're also a young republic and a young republican democracy. So you're growing, and I must tell you, you're growing well. So some of these things are part of debates that take place in society. You are fortunate that you are debating in today's day and age with so much history and precedence available to you to think, talk and work on that. But I am sure you will come up with good decisions.
As you very rightly said that it is for Nepalese people, it's for us to decide about this ratification process and the impacts it will have or will not have in the future agreements that we'll be signing with the foreign governments, In this context, I would like to know, can India remain totally indifferent to the happenings inside Nepal?
Vijay, the answer to your question is certainly no. And let me tell you why. Because we are the only country which has a vested interest in Nepal doing well.
Simple, or doing unwell?
No, sir. Nepal doing well. We have a vested interest in your country doing well. Let me put this quite straightforwardly. You do well, you benefit, we also benefit. We see benefits in every single thing. When you supposing by some chance things are not going so well, naturally there are impacts and impactations that take place in India. After all, we have, as you've mentioned, so many kinds of links at the level of people and society, and these have ramifications. So we have a vested interest that you do well. There's Samrid Nepal and Khushi Nepali.
Okay. So do you think that in past India had too many red lines for Nepal, and now the number should be reduced? Few?
I have no idea about how many red lines or no red lines. I believe that there is just one red line: Nepal should do well. And we should strive to make a win-win situation of India-Nepal relations, simply because both of us would hugely benefit as a result of this. We must leverage our societal ties, our people's ties, our economic ties, our geography. We must leverage this to the benefit of our people on both sides of the border.
When you refuse the existence of red lines, you are truly speaking like a diplomat.
So 21 years I joined, give me that much of a liberty at least.
Sir, I am about to complete this now.
Sure.
Do you believe that in past Nepal and India took each other for granted? Or there were different circumstances? We were living under different times. And as times have changed, we have a new Nepal emerging and the new generation is coming up, So and if we say that Nepal is changing, isn't India also changing?
Yes.
And what will be the ramification of this new generation?
Vijay, let me borrow your phrase. हम तो वैश्य युग में रहते हैं, material world में रहते हैं ना. So material world में, look at the changes in India. Yeah, we were a developing country once upon a time, struggling in various ways. Today, we are moving towards a $5 trillion economy. We will certainly be part of the 5 largest economies in the world. Let's look at the case of Nepal. Everyone only internalized the fact of being a least developed country, and today you are heading towards a middle income country in 10 years' time. Nepalis who had hardly traveled outside the subcontinent are now in every part of the world. Look at the kind of change. So what is my expectation? Both our countries have benefited from globalization. But both our countries are also rooted in our tradition. They're very strong societies, rooted in our traditions, rooted in who we are, the way we are, and the way we have built our societies. So we are perhaps in that sense a very unique set of societies which know that we can partake as part of this Vaishya Yuga, as you like to put it, part of this material world, take advantage of globalization, yet remain strongly rooted in who we are. And I think that's the strength of India-Nepal relations.
There's new Nepal emerging, sir. There's a new India emerging, and there are existential realities of India-Nepal relations. Okay?
That is true.
How do we balance this? And if we fail to balance this?
Well, therein, of course, lies a challenge. But I believe that the existential relationships that exist are based on super solid foundations. They have foundations which, if you recall our own conversations a few minutes back, they rest on kinds of platforms which have resisted all kinds of change, including nature's change, geography's attempts, etc. Whether the river shifts course or there's an earthquake or whatever, they resist all of that. So we are, in that sense, fortunate. We have God and nature on your side, people's levels on the other side. But we must also understand that history, nature, etc. are on one side. Contemporary, today and future tomorrow need to be aligned with this. And for that, I believe all of us have a role to play. You and me, as members of today, let me say halves of today also, our governments in particular, our leaders more than anyone else. And I'm very happy to see that at the level of leadership, we've had a certain amount of understanding on how to take things forward. Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has visited Nepal 4 times in his last term of 5 years. It's perhaps the largest number that he went to any one country. Twice in my terms here. Prime Minister Shri K.P. Sharma Oli went to India twice. The Right Honourable President has been. I believe all of these particular things, they result in a cementing of understanding. And it's understandings which can take things forward, because in the world we are, opportunities are galore. We really must leverage them and take them.
Sir, I would like to go back to the day you arrived in Kathmandu. I think I happened to see you within a few days of your arrival in Kathmandu. Situation was very tense and weather was rough. And comparing that day, you seem very relaxed today. And we must appreciate the fact that during your tenure here, atmosphere is relaxed, and we have had few achievements like Arun 3 taking off and the petroleum pipeline, or the high-level visits which you just mentioned. You know, these are, we cannot take them lightly. You know, so congratulations for those things. What were your lows during your ambassador tenure?
Vijay,
those were your highs and
no. Thank you very much for pointing out, you know, things where we've seen forward movement. Vijay, in my opinion, in the last 3 odd years or 2 years and 9 months that I've been here, Nepal has seen a lot of change. I'm glad that projects have gone forward, our connectivity has improved, and this huge thing, Arun 3, which has the potential of having game-changing impact in the Nepalese economy, has gone forward. But I'm also so happy to see that the multi-party electoral system establishing a federal democratic republic in Nepal has gone forward. You know, these are the kind of changes that have taken place, which in my opinion are truly highs that I will reflect upon. You know, India-Nepal relations are relations of everyday chore. Every day we have something or the other. Every day we have something new. Every day we have some challenges take place. Let me mention to you 1 or 2 challenges. You know, when I came here, this Kailash Mansarovar Yatra through Nepal had just about begun. I had no idea, even our embassy sitting in Kathmandu had hardly any idea of the kind of numbers which were flying from Nepal going to Simikot to Hilsa and going on. And we faced enormous challenges. I remember in 2018, we had some 1,500 people stuck out there and not knowing really what to do. But these have been all learning experiences, and learning with our partners in Nepal, they have all been institutional arrangements which we've been able to put in place and take things forward. We've had so many other challenges, whether it's the pesticides testing for but what do I see in all of them? In all of them, I see one single simple thing, that look, issues are bound to keep coming up. Issues are bound to keep coming up. What we need to do, we need to be resolute in our resolve to find solutions to issues. And if we do that, we will find the solution.
Nepal-India relations cannot be issue-free, right? There will be one issue or another. एक लफड़ा चलता रहेगा, right?
साथ में रहते हैं.
Life is a mixed bag, you know, as they say.
बिल्कुल.
I think you did pretty well considering the options for an Indian ambassador in Nepal, you know.
तो एक तो जबरदस्त ऑप्शन है कि विजय पांडे से मिलने या ना मिलने, ठीक है ना, लेकिन वो ऑप्शन नहीं है एक्चुअली. Before we yes, sure.
leave today, would you like to I want you to sum up your experiences, challenges, issues that we might face in future, and opportunities for the future. ये जवाब आप हिंदी में दे दीजिए कि आने वाले दिन के लिए नेपाल इंडिया में संबंध में किस किस्म का चुनौती आ सकता है, कहाँ पे टकराव हो सकता है, कहाँ पे उसका समाधान करने का उपाय क्या होगा, और हम आगे कैसे जाएंगे.
विजय, देखिए, आपने खुद बहुत अच्छी तरह बोला कि हम लोग इकट्ठे रहते हैं, गाड़ी अच्छी चल रही है, लेकिन ऊपर नीचे उतार चढ़ाव तो आएंगे ही आएंगे, हम इसको कुछ नहीं कर सकते. कुछ इन द नेचर ऑफ इंटरस्टेट रिलेशंस हैं, लोगों के बीच में होते हैं तो हम उसको कंपटीशन कहते हैं. कुछ कॉन्टेस्टेशंस ऐसे हैं कि हम लोग डेमोक्रेसीज हैं, अपने लोगों के लिए वी वांट द बेस्ट, तो उसमें थोड़ा बहुत तो कंपटीशन एलिमेंट्स ये सब होते हैं. चैलेंज लाइज इन बीइंग एबल टू रिजॉल्व थिंग्स, उसमें बात करें एक दूसरे के साथ. कुछ चीजें आज रिजॉल्व हो जाएंगी, कुछ कल हो जाएंगी, कुछ चीजों में टेक्नोलॉजी रिजॉल्व कर देगा आपके इश्यूज, कोई ऐसी बड़ी बात नहीं है. चुनौतियां जो मैं समझता हूं हमको आगे देखने की जरूरत है कि देखिए, जैसे जैसे हमारी इकोनॉमीज बढ़ेंगी, जैसे जैसे हमारे यहाँ एस्पिरेशंस बढ़ेंगी, our abilities to be able to address the aspirations of the people on both sides is not going to be an easy task. इंडिया में भी चैलेंज है, आपके यहाँ उससे भी ज्यादा चैलेंज. Can we keep ourselves on balance to try and see what we can do of leveraging each other's relationship to better the situation of the other and to add to this particular thing that we keep our challenges less. Look, we are looking at specific actions and specific points of action. मैं तो बहुत मानता हूँ कि अगर नेपाल में आप लोग, और जैसे सरकार also has got this in its plans, makes a great deal of efforts on some basic infrastructure development, you are on the way to becoming your middle income country dream very easily and you will do well on that. अब हम लोग एंड में आ रहे हैं, मुझे दो चीज़ें कहने दीजिए. हमने शुरू किया अबाउट माई ओन लाइफ हिस्ट्री. नेपाल में आई ऑल्सो हैड वन वेरी यूनिक अपॉर्चुनिटी जो शायद और कहीं दुनिया में ना होती. एंड दिस इज अ वेरी यूनिक एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ बीइंग एबल टू पुट माई सेल्फ एंड माई प्रोफेशन टुगेदर, एंड विच वॉज व्हेन the government of India made a historic decision that we will celebrate the 550th anniversary of the birth of Guru Nanak in a big way. As a practicing Sikh, obviously I was honored, thrilled, and we would have certainly done something in any country in the world had I been there. But Nepal gave me an absolutely unique opportunity, something that perhaps at least I had not focused on. An understanding, or maybe even a discovery, that Guru Nanak himself had stepped foot in Nepal. What a change it makes for me. And I will tell you, being able to relay this fact to the global Sikh diaspora, which through the good people like you today has not become so difficult anymore, become quite easy. Nepal releasing commemorative coins which are legal tenders. Believe me, legal tenders are not issued by countries lightly at all. It is symbolic of the kind of relationship between India and Nepal, and more than that also I would say, or along with it, the great work done by the small Sikh community in Nepal. Whether it is at truckers, or the trucking business, or the public transport, or it is the factors of Maharaja Ranjit Singh and the forces and the Sikhs, boys and girls and gentlemen who are living in Nepalganj, or it is a very simple thing that even today Nepalese going outside, in particular joining the Indian Army and others, are still referred to as Lahoris. What a beautiful set of coincidences, couldn't have happened anywhere else in the world. So I look at all of these particular things as something so special to Nepal, which perhaps would have been very difficult for me to realize anywhere else. So I want to say a very big thank you to Nepal, the people, government, everyone. I was afforded an unbelievable and a unique opportunity to be part for that. For me, a self-actualization aspect, not just a professional aspect, and I'm happy. And when the good words that you see, you mentioned to me you should not listen to your own praise more than 30 seconds, but it makes you feel very good when it goes beyond 30 seconds.
I have praised. I was looking at the watch. मैंने घड़ी देखा था. I have praised you for 25 seconds, and you deserve that.
Thank you so much.
How do you feel today as you are about to wrap up your job today, and how do you look at the future?
Look, I'm very satisfied with my tenure here in Nepal. I'm also extremely satisfied at having served in the Indian Foreign Service for 38 years. It has been, as I told you, self-actualization. It has grown me tremendously, and I'm so glad that I've been able to achieve many, many things for which I set out in my own way at the age of 22 when I sat for the competitive exam. Nepal has given me the final opportunity. I've had other opportunities too, but my government has been very kind to me, and I'm very grateful to them for all of this. My colleagues in the embassy here in Nepal and elsewhere who've served me have been absolutely sterling. And Vijay, I cherish friendship with people like you. I hope we'll be able to carry this forward.
Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, sir.
Guru Nanak का आशीर्वाद आप पर हमेशा बना रहे.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful journey ahead in life.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vijay.